All right. Hello, everyone. So, this week's online workshop is going to be about our article writing, which is something that I think people are often surprised that we actually do because, we have a newspaper and everything. But as a sports news station, we also keep our portion of the website updated with articles, whether that be big sports news in the Mizzou sports realm or game results mostly is what it is. But yeah, so to start off, this is what our website looks like. It's mutv.missouri.edu. So it's kind of the hub for everything. It's a little bit outdated. We're kind of working on getting it updated. But if you go under sports and then articles, it pulls this page up, and this is where you see all of our headlines and about the first paragraph of every article. So yeah. So the first thing that I want to talk about, this is an example of one of my articles from last year, well, a couple months ago, covering the softball tournament. Yeah, it was a tournament. One of the first things that I want to say is that writing styles are really individual, especially when it comes to sports, because a lot of it depends on your knowledge of the sport and everything. But for the most part, we try to follow kind of a breakdown of what we like to see. So personally, I'm in charge of the editing and publishing of all of your articles. So once you write an article, you send it to me, and then I'll upload it to the website. So starting with the headline, what I like to see is the sport or team, sometimes who they played, if that's important, but mostly the result and maybe just any big key moment. So Mizzou softball, there's a team, finishes the weekend with a walk-off win. So there's a result, the win, and then the walk-off would be the key moment. Um, Going from there, sometimes sports can go against the typical news writing style, like the inverted pyramid, which is what a big the writing style that most news places want you to use. And the inverted pyramid is, so if you're looking at a pyramid, it usually goes like this. Well, it's like this for the inverted pyramid because you want all of the important stuff at the very beginning in the lead in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, and you kind of get to the less and less and less important stuff. I personally, for sports, write a little bit different because I like to go more chronologically with how the game goes. So typically for my lead, I try to introduce the game, like the game scenario, where it's at. So here you can see that I said after a 2-0 start to the Mizzou tournament. So it's kind of like an introduction to maybe where the team was before the game, leading up to the game, or if it was a big matchup, an important conference game, an important win or loss. That's something that is good to put in the headline. Um, and then going through, I typically will go paragraph by paragraph by big events or sometimes by innings if all of the innings are exciting, which is not very often. But Mizzou softball is really good, so sometimes they were. Um, Other than that, some of the big things that you need to obviously include would be scoring plays and big plays. So if you're talking about football, you're not going to talk about every down or anything. You're going to go the big plays, injuries maybe, key moments of the game. But those should kind of be written paragraph by paragraph. Um, Another important part that I like to include is athlete names. Because I think it gives the story more of a face when you put athletes attached to it. And, obviously you write like that with any other sport. So even the smaller sports, do your research, like for softball and volleyball and soccer. I did a lot of those. If you do your research and you kind of follow the team and you do a lot of the same sport, it'll make it easier for you to write because you'll know their names, you'll know who the good players are, their positions, whatever the case be. So you can see I kind of started off talking about the game. So-and-so led off for the Cornhuskers and battled Mizzou's Jordan Weber through a 6-pitch at bat that ended in a solo home run. So normally you wouldn't talk about the first at bat, but the first at bat was a solo home run. So that's a big deal. And then I just kind of keep going paragraph by paragraph like that, talking about the big plays, the scoring plays. So you can see down here, Mizzou answered with 2 runs of their own in the bottom of the third on a 2-run shot from Kayla Kessinger with Brooke Williams on base from a double to left field. You know, the on base from a double to left field, not essential, but saying she was on base is nice because that obviously contributes to how they got the 2-run shot. For the most part, we like to keep the language pretty formal, but I am not opposed at all to you using some slang like a 2-run shot or went yard or things like that. In the softball case specifically, it's just kind of like a sport by sport thing, you know, the lingo. So when you get to kind of where you're finished talking about the result and how the game went and everything, at the end in the wrap up, that's where I kind of like to do my highlights and then my like setup for the next match. So when I say highlights, I mean key players, how many runs they scored, how many points they scored, who had the most kills, if it was volleyball, who had the most points, who had the most yards, whatever. The stat leaders, basically. That's where I kind of like to do that. And if there was like a specific thing about the team that just did exceptionally well, like I remember whenever I covered volleyball, the offense had a super good hitting percentage, which is similar to a batting average. So I highlighted how good their hitting percentage was that game, something like that. I also like to do more than just what is given on the Mizzou Athletic website and statistics. I sometimes like to go look and see how they stack up against the other SEC teams, other SEC players, things like that. It just makes you sound more educated and gives more context to the articles, and I think that's important. Makes it more interesting to read. And then usually my second to last or last paragraph will include some kind of like season outlook. Or just kind of like to wrap up the full picture. So you can see that I wrote Mizzou went 3-1 on the weekend to improve their overall record to 15-6 going into their home game against UMKC this Wednesday at 4:00. So I'm wrapping up what happened in this article, and I'm giving a transition into their next game, a little preview to their next game sometimes if you would like. When I did one about football, after we lost to Florida, that pretty much took us out of like bowl contention. We had very little bowl contention. This was whenever we didn't know that we weren't going to be able to go to a bowl game because of the NCAA, but things like that, just how the results will affect the rest of the season are important. And if you're wondering how the hell you get all this information, first of all, we want you to go to the games if possible because you just get so much more context and background into the game when you're actually there. But if you're unable to, we understand that too. That's fine. Just know that you get an extra point if you attend the game. But what we use is the Mizzou Athletic website, MUTigers.com, which is this, not even the homepage. I don't know why I was on baseball. MUTigers.com. So this will have everything that you need for finding a specific game, statistics, roster for name spellings, everything like that. So if we go back to this softball game that I was writing about, softball schedule. So these were the 2 games that I was talking about in that article. And what I like to do kind of is before I even start writing, go look at the box score, go look at the recap that they have written. You can't copy what they write in the recap, obviously, because it's not your own work, but it kind of gives you an idea of the highlights of the game. But the box score, I mean, this shows you the scoring summary, so that basically writes itself for you. Like, you pretty much could have a paragraph, or maybe since this is in the same inning, 1 paragraph for these 2 different scores, but this gives you a good idea. And then the stats and the name spellings and everything. And then I like to look at the play-by-play personally, because that kind of gives me a visual of what happened in the game. So, you know, it takes some time, it takes some work, but it's work that, you know, you're going to have to put in to get a good product out. So this is, use the athletic website to your advantage. There's nothing wrong with that. And the biggest thing also is when you're using names and things like that, please, please double check spellings, because that's something that we will get dinged on. And that's something obviously that I have to double check too, as your editor. But you also should be revising and reviewing your articles before they're sent to me. So big thing is, every team has their full roster on here. So go in and look at the name spellings and double check your name spellings. Yeah. I'd say stylistically, one of the other things would be the first time a player is mentioned, use their full name. Any other time that they're mentioned in the article, use their last name. So that's kind of a breakdown of the game recap, but we also do more than just the game recap. I did an article whenever Barry Odom was fired, and I didn't pull it up online, but this was the article that I wrote about when Barry Odom was fired. So this one, I used more of that inverted pyramid style because it was important, because it had just happened, and this was published the day after he was fired. So since it wasn't about a game, the inverted pyramid was pretty important. So I started out with exactly the headline. Mizzou fires Barry Odom after 4th season as head coach. And then my lead was the important chunk of information. Less than 24 hours after the conclusion of the Mizzou 2019 football season, athletic director Jim Sterk fired Barry Odom after his 4th season as the head coach at his alma mater. This news came just 4 days after the ruling of the NCAA appeal was released, upholding the original punishments of postseason ban and recruitment restrictions, which was important at the time because that had literally just happened a couple days ago. And then I kind of talked about how their season ended and the mixed responses that came from fans and whatnot. And then I kind of went into Odom's journey as a coach at Mizzou, and then his legacy at Mizzou, because that was the more important information, was what he did while he was at Mizzou, and then his legacy and what he was moving on to do would be what would be at the bottom as the less important stuff. So really, it just depends on what you're writing about. But I would say for games, you don't have to follow the inverted pyramid, because it doesn't make sense that way. You should follow it chronologically. But if you're doing a feature like this, or somebody covered the Kobe death, and so a feature like that, doing more of the inverted pyramid where you are highlighting the important stuff at the top and kind of going to the less important stuff as you get to the bottom would be the better way to do that. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you for watching. I'll put my questions out there for you guys, or maybe a little task. I haven't decided yet. Hopefully this isn't too confusing. It's not anything you need to master right now, because we'll have plenty of time coming up in these next few months, and then I'll be able to help you whenever you submit your articles to edit them and give you guidance while you're writing. One thing I did forget to mention was that we like the word count to be around 250. 250 is a minimum. So you can go as much over 250, which, I mean, not enough that you lose your reader, obviously, but keep it around 250, but 250 is a minimum.